Hello, I'm Lynn Mahoney, president of San Francisco State University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this celebration of this extraordinary academic year. I think, like many of you, I have looked to the arts for comfort and inspiration these last few weeks, reading novels, watching films, and in particular have turned to music to be both soothed and stimulated. To help commemorate the end of the academic year and to celebrate the importance of the arts, we turn to San Francisco State University's School of Music. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our host, Cyrus Ginwala, director of the Morrison Chamber Music Center.
Thank you, President Mahoney, and welcome everyone to this special concert, a celebration of the academic year. My name is Cyrus Ginwala. I'm the director of the School of Music at San Francisco State University and the Morrison Chamber Music Center. It is my pleasure to host this joyous event. Today we present a performance by the Alexander String Quartet, our artists in residence at the Morrison Chamber Music Center and members of the faculty in the School of Music, in a performance of Antonín Dvořák's beloved American String Quartet. And stay tuned immediately after the performance for a chat I had with two members of the quartet. Finally, I wish everyone, and especially the class of 2020, a safe and restful summer. Enjoy. Thank you all for joining us for the performance today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm joined now by two members of the Alexander String Quartet, Fred Lifsitz and Sandy Walsh-Wilson. And I thought, since we didn't talk before the performance, we might talk a little bit about the context in which the quartet was written, and what it means in terms of Dvořák's ultimate output, and especially where he was when he wrote it. So maybe, Fred, do you want to start there?
Well, sure. You know, Dvořák was brought to America by a very wealthy woman in New York and paid something like 25 or 30 times his normal salary to head up a new music conservatory in Lower Manhattan. And they came only because his wife looked at the amount of money in the contract and signed it and sent it back. So they came with their kids and nannies and his assistant to New York. And he had a horrible time in New York City. But he ventured, his assistant knew of a wonderful a Czech village in Iowa called Spillville. And they took a couple of trains there with the family in the summer of 1893. And he was at home. He loved it. He could drink the beer that he loved, the bread that he loved. And he would take long walks in nature. And he heard bird songs. The third movement of this piece features the bird song from the Scarlet Tanager, which did drive him crazy, but he included it in the piece. And he heard great influences of music, African-American spirituals, Native American music that he had never heard before, obviously from Europe. And he loved it. He was happy. And the piece was written at an amazingly joyous time in his life. And it expresses that. It's remained a staple of our repertoire for all 4 decades of the quartet's existence.
And that's a good point to make, is that even though he may have been homesick for a place which he couldn't get back to at that time, that this was written in an atmosphere where he felt some relief and some connection to the culture he had left. Sandy, I know you guys have played this quartet for a long time. I'm wondering how it's figured perhaps in the quartet's repertoire, and this meaning, the meaning of the piece over a period of years, whether that's changed for you at all.
It's interesting that you ask, because certainly it's one of those works that long before the quartet even was founded, our quartet is now approaching 40 years old, everybody had played this piece. It's one of those, it's a real chestnut that amateur musicians and young student musicians love to play. And to be quite candid, it can sound sometimes a little hackneyed, you know, this and the Borodin Quartet are the sort of pieces that, you know, oh, I guess we have to do Dvořák again. Well, you know, I must say we probably went for a good decade without playing it. We did play at one time or another, we played all the Dvořák quartets. And the others are all charming, but having come back to this quartet just about 4 or 5 years ago, in fact, to record it just 2 years ago for our Foghorn label, it was like rediscovering it all over again. It is a superb piece of music. It's exquisitely crafted. It has probably something to do with the fact that, as Fred said, Dvořák was so happy in Spillville, and he wrote this piece extremely quickly. And by the way, he wrote the Opus 97, the immediately succeeding work, which is the viola quintet, also called the American Quintet, in Spillville at the same time. It's a piece we love to play, both of them, frankly.
This performance may have been unique because you guys were not in the same room, as I recall. Can you talk briefly about what it took to put this together?
Well, we each recorded our part, starting with one and then adding them on. And then they were timed together with the video of us actually playing by our record producer, so that it would get to a certain, as far as the latency is concerned, it would be, it would be together with the sound. Technique that was used throughout Hollywood for many, many years in the old days, but it's come into vogue during this pandemic. And we get along remarkably well this way in 4 separate rooms. But it does take, it really keeps us on our toes. I've listened to it, and to me it was very exciting because partially because we just had to listen so carefully. We couldn't see one another. We had to listen very carefully in order to respond, almost like playing completely in the dark. And so that was one element of it. And it was very special because we knew we made this recording for this occasion, the end of our school year at San Francisco State and the Morrison series and everything. And for us, that was very meaningful.
Sandy, how was it for you?
Really quite lovely in many ways. You know, we're getting better at doing it this way rather quickly. Some of the listeners may have seen a performance that we gave similarly, which we started also during quarantine around Easter time when we recorded Haydn's 7 Last Words. And that was a rather different experience. We literally were watching each other on our computers and trying to listen super carefully. One of us had to go out and do this first and lay it down, and then we each had to follow. And by the way, none of this would have been possible without, and I have to give him a shout out, Matt Carr, fantastic audio engineer and producer who has been pedaling as fast as he can in the background to help us make this all work as seamlessly as it really does. But we couldn't have done this without his being involved in the middle. We have been bouncing stuff up to the cloud. Matt's been sort of stitching it together and figuring it out. But the first effort that we did, we actually filmed and recorded at the same time. This Dvořák and a couple of other projects we're trying to get going now are in some ways rather easier because we have a rather large discography, and this work is a work that we actually recorded rather recently and released it just a couple of years ago. So the trick really was to listen to our own recording and play simultaneously, recording just the individual parts. And as a template, that actually has worked rather better. It's better than the Beethoven that we tried to do, which we recorded 12 years ago and found, my God, how did we play it that fast? You know?
Yeah, well, gentlemen, I'm glad this was a happy experience for you. I hope it's not a happier experience than playing live because, as you mentioned, there are so many cues which are even invisible to the audience, I think, that we take from one another when we're performing in the same room. And you don't realize until they're gone how critically important they are to making things work. And because you guys spend so much time together performing, so much of that has become automatic over the years that I imagine that it's so unspoken now. You're not even always aware of it. I want to wish everybody a wonderful year. I want to thank you guys for helping us out with this. It is a wonderful ray of sunshine in a year which has been difficult academically. I want to thank President Mahoney for her introduction and her leadership at the university. Wish everyone a good summer, and look forward to more good things in the fall and in the future. So thank you both.
Thank you, Cyrus.
Thank you.